We write the year 2050. F1 has seen its latest iteration with the newly added Podium Pass Premium Ultra Pro Supreme. After completing 200 races, you get to unlock Latifi's championship winning car from 2033. And although everyone is saying that this year will be completely different, you just don't buy into it. You have seen too much. This is more than just a problem of each title. There's a glaring problem we need to address. Problem. Something even one of the biggest studios in the world couldn't fix. And a problem that may keep F1 from being a good racing game ever. And with that, welcome back to Overtake. How have you all been doing? Recently done any racing on F1 22? No? Not surprised. The state F1 is in right now is pretty rough. Player numbers are down by like 30% from last year's game around the same time. Many things can be attributed to this. Like for example the pandemic being in full swing last year still. Or the takeover from EA scaring people away. But the fact of the matter is, the F1 game is less popular nowadays. F1 22 has been on the tough side of YouTube critics for a while now as well. Most of the points brought up, and even some I levied against the current title, are the addition of senseless modes, the abysmal ballooning of the season pass, and quite honestly, a less enjoyable racing experience. But if you want a more enjoyable YouTube experience, you can go ahead and hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and tap that bell to always know when we upload another controversial discussion like this one. But back to the rant. It's clear that even whilst an overhaul on the outside was done this year, some of the main problems that plagued the title for years stayed untouched. And it was at this time that I realized something. The franchise and the way it handles releases is the problem, and not the number behind the title. The yearly circle of games is not only toxic for fans and players, but also results in a stale meta of only slightly changing titles with big hype behind them. F1 is probably the biggest perpetrator of this. This series comes out every year and did so for quite some time. The biggest changes are down to licensing stuff, so updating the liveries and the calendar if needed. This brings a few problems with it. If I now came to you with the chance to create your own video game, like a real AAA title with good graphics and solid functions behind it, I even gave you a complete studio with devs, design, and marketing, and on top I gave you the groundwork for the game already with it. Sounds like Christmas, doesn't it? But if the catch was that you only have a year to complete it, you just wouldn't make it happen. This time frame is ludicrous. Games like Gran Turismo were developed for 7+ years and still came out unfinished and with a ton to improve. Of course, the scope of GT7 games is much bigger, but nevertheless a comparison stands. We have seen it time and time again. Some of the best titles in all of gaming took ages to make. Admittedly, mostly different genres, but still the point holds true. If you cut corners with a time frame, you're bound to end up with shortcuts in-game. That's why when you now take a drive in a supercar in F1 22, it feels like the soapbox you built in the 90s with your granddad. There's no deep development process behind it, and they don't care in particular either. The main focus of every title like F1 is to refine the mediocre core and push out like 1 or 2 pseudo editions, because with close to no time to actually implement feedback players give you over the months of playing, there's no real reason to release a game other than profiting each year again and again. It's sort of the same with the phone companies of the world, where they brute force ideas and sell them to us as innovation, only to have us pump yet another month's worth of rent into our inventory. The sheer idea of having a pillar of racing games like F1 be an annual title is flawed in my opinion. If they can't make it happen to be a good racing game, even with a massive studio like EA behind them now, nobody really can. However, it's not just one game that has these problems. While F1 is the most prominent, they are not the only culprit. Yearly releases generally feature these types of issues. I see it myself. Let's take Milestone's release of MotoGP every year. I do struggle to find words to make the reviews sound different every year. This is mostly because when changes do end up being made, it is either so small you don't notice it, or it is some minor part of the game that nobody really cares about. In general, no HUD change or new look to the menu is a valid selling point for me. Same goes for slight graphical improvements or the 20th update to ray tracing. A very popular option is to virtue signal here. This means that while saying nothing, you indicate that you have some higher interest in something or someone. An example of that would be if you saw a new MotoGP or F1 game with a mode re-added from years ago and brought to you as a selling point. The official explanation will always be the will of the players and the feedback we've got, when in reality it always seems like a way to recycle ideas to fit the terrible time frame. WRC actually acknowledged this once. When the development of the series switched hands from Milestone to Kiloton, the first title in WRC 5 was one of the low points of the series in total, with major bad critiques along the way. You know what they did? Oh yeah. They took their time, took 2 years, and made it better. And it actually worked. Who would have thought that taking a minute to think about what to implement into your game would actually turn out in your favor? And guess what? This worked so good, they did it again. Between WRC 8 and 9, 2 years passed to make the game next-gen ready and to implement it on PC better. Not saying that it propelled WRC into the ultimate racing game, but afterwards you could clearly see the same problems occurring when they went back to the annual schedule. The solution to this whole debacle could be so easy, yet nobody seems to think of it. After relentlessly raging on about the problems these releases give us, what could be the solutions? Well, the obvious one would be to make games like F1 biannual. Take the first year to get the feedback and implement it in the following title. Look, except for this season with all the regulation changes and whatnot, you can still keep a patch cycle and add new liveries and drivers and all this stuff as part of a DLC or next year update. It usually isn't that much fixing that needs to take place, especially with the tracks. None of them are getting laser scanned every year or even change their appearance too much. A Hungaroring from F1 2018 will look the same from today, with the exception of some minor details, of course. A change of schedule would lead to a way more refined playing experience, as well as the chance to truly attract more players and foster a more sustainable esports model. Even though F1 esports is as big as it gets in terms of virtual competition, having drivers focus on a single game for a longer period of time can only be better to foster new talent. It also helps with certainty and planability for the participants when they know what to expect coming up. However, wishful thinking at this point, more realism may be needed, especially since we know who we're dealing with. I could list all the best arguments for why annual games are subpar and find even better ones, but it is almost certain that F1 will assimilate into the role of annual sports titles EA fires out, just as FIFA, Madden, and so on. Of course, it wasn't different when Codemasters was doing it solo, but the takeover diminished the chances of a better time frame even more. Reason for that is that annual titles provide the biggest stream of revenue for the company. Having you buy a game at $70 every time just pays much better than having a longer time frame between them. If they now find ways to better implement microtransactions, they have a winning formula for them, just not for us. Unfortunately, this will mean that if you have a fundamental problem with the franchise, like so many of us have, you will need to wait a good while for it to ever show signs of change. Because just like with phones, if you wait long enough, these things are going to improve, just not from year to year. But this means that the basic qualms we have with the game will remain for the foreseeable future, making F1 an almost unfixable mess in the current state. Do you agree? If so, don't hesitate to write down your opinion in the comments below. If you are interested in some of the wildest racing action you can't get from F1, why don't you take a look at our first Dream Team Series episode over here. Thank you all so much for watching. Hope to see you soon. And until then, cheerio.